Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Brian shares his path from undergrad in the US to working straight for a new venture capital fund in Tokyo. Learn why he turned down his return offer in investment banking after his junior year summer at Jefferies, and what the biggest challenges were as a junior employee in a sink or swim role. Enjoy. Brian, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Patrick.
So it'd be awesome if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
For sure. So I started my career, I guess you could say, as a summer analyst at an investment bank. I guess that's where a lot of people kind of start their careers in finance. So I worked at Jefferies for a summer. I spent most of my time there, cycling around with a couple different teams, but probably most of my time with the tech banking team. I kind of had a pre-existing sort of interest in technology. And they were pretty busy that summer, so got looped in with the team there. Ended up actually taking a different path ultimately, and maybe we can kind of touch on that later. But ended up getting an opportunity to join kind of an early venture team that was forming in Japan, of all places. So I actually graduated. I moved to Tokyo. I worked for a VC there for a couple years. Transferred to another team in the same VC covering kind of Europe and Israel, and then ended up finding a startup I totally fell in love with and joined just 2 months ago. So that's kind of my long arc from kind of finance to VC to tech.
Great. So let's start all the way back in undergrad. Were you always kind of focused on finance, or kind of how did you fall into this internship? I assume it was a junior year internship.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I had
because where you went to school wasn't like it's not a super finance focused.
Yeah, that's right. So I went to Johns Hopkins, where that's right. We didn't have like an undergraduate business program.
Mm-hmm.
What we did have was an interesting professor who kind of sat kind of within the economics department, who kind of found students with interest in finance and the markets, and took them on as research analysts. So we kind of had our own community of sort of finance interested people on campus, and I was part of that. But I had other interests. I was actually an East Asian studies major, so I studied Japanese, which obviously comes into play later in my story. But I would say nothing really special. I kind of
What interested you about East Asian studies?
Yeah, so I actually spent a summer living in Japan when I was in high school. I did an exchange there, and that kind of sparked interest. I also was born in Hong Kong, and my family were expats in that part of the world for a while. So kind of had it in the background in my life for a while, and decided to study it a bit more seriously in college. Cool. But I was sort of just generally interested in finance. I think the way most people become interested, and sort of
hey, this might be a good career move. At least not be dependent on the parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you graduate, kind of thing. Okay, so you do this internship. It sounds like they were pretty busy that summer. Was it just something where they gave you a full-time offer and you didn't take it, or like it was just brutal and you knew it wasn't for you?
No, so yeah, they gave me a full-time offer, which I was super excited to receive. It was to join their tech banking team, and I love the people there. I still think it's an awesome place. Couple of things happened. So kind of right after receiving the full-time offer, I head back to school. I'm like on top of the world, set, basically until I graduate. And I got the news that I was able to graduate a semester early. So that was one piece. And then I also sort of kind of rekindled a relationship I had with somebody in Japan who I'd actually kind of informally interned with the previous summer. So the summer before I worked at Jefferies.
Got it.
And he kind of floated this idea of having me join a venture team that he was forming. So he was sort of investing off the balance sheet of Fidelity, and kind of in the process of starting a fund. And anyway, so he floated this idea. I thought, I'm going to graduate early. We kind of said maybe there's something there, and kind of based on that, I turned down the job offer at Jefferies, which kind of seemed crazy in the moment, but in retrospect, I think was the right decision for me. And I moved to Tokyo and worked for a couple months as a waiter in a restaurant. Uh,
Had you ever, I mean, you said you had spent a year there, right, as a high school student?
I spent a couple months there in high school, and then I spent about a semester there in college.
Okay, so tell me about it was something, it wasn't super new to you, but was it still some after a few months, would it feel like culture shock a little bit, or was it something where you felt at home?
Uh, yeah, I would say there's definitely still lots of culture shock, and part of the agreement was I was gonna spend my semester that I had graduated early in Japan, improving my Japanese language ability, um, so that kind of when the fund was in place and when this guy was ready to hire me, that I was good to go. So I kind of moved there with nothing, didn't know anyone, took language classes during the day, worked as a waiter, as I said, at night, and then eventually I got the call saying, you're hired, and that's where I started my career.
And so tell me a little bit about that, just that relationship, the ability to kind of take that leap of faith that this was the right move for you. Because I think a lot of people maybe have something exciting, but they have the sure thing, and maybe it's not, maybe finance isn't right for them, and they know that deep down, but they think, well, this is the path I have to follow because everyone's going to call me crazy if I don't.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely all those feelings,
Mhm.
and they were much stronger in the moment. I mean, I think I'm sort of, when I look back, I think I tend to kind of minimize them a little bit, but I was definitely feeling all those anxieties
Mhm.
with
And
the
then when you're
decision.
waiting tables in Tokyo, you're probably that doubles
Yeah,
doubles working
exactly.
hard. Yeah.
Definitely was kind of not where I imagined I would be in that moment in time.
Hmm.
And it was a decision that I kind of relied on my closest mentors for guidance, and kind of just took a step back and kind of looked at things more holistically. I kind of thought about like some of my peers when I was working in the investment bank, and I think it was pretty easy for me to recognize that some of my interests were a bit different. I really liked the tech banking group, and I think that was more because I was super interested in technology and how technology solves problems more
Hmm.
than the details of specific transactions we were trying to underwrite.
Hmm.
And I think that might be true of kind of most people, but yeah, I think that combined with getting to also experience living in a foreign country right out of school, and kind of using my language ability and what I'd studied in university,
Right
made
away. Put
made
it to
it.
the test.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, when I moved down to Buenos Aires after I got my MBA from Wharton. It was
Uh,
I thought I thought I spoke
yeah,
Spanish really well, and I got down there, and I had my mother's Colombian, my I had a girlfriend that was Mexican. I had like my Spanish was the most, and my grandmother's from Catalonia, Spain, so like Barcelona, like Spain Spanish, and that's kind of what they teach for
okay,
high school. So
yeah,
I had the most messed up, and now sound kind of like a gringo too. So it was like the most messed up split of Spanish. Everyone was like, "Wait, are you from Buenos Aires?" Because I'd be like, "Oh, vos sos," because I'd kind of integrate some of that, and I
yeah,
don't know,
yeah,
it was a mess. But yeah, it can be
yeah,
tough. It can be tough when you're moving and you don't know anybody, and it can be lonely. It can be. I mean, there was a good expat community there too. Then I had some good friends, so that was lucky. But did you feel that like you were able to quickly make friends outside of work at all, or like what was that like? Or did you kind of
yeah.
just stay in a really small kind of?
Well, yeah, it was interesting. I had kind of one really close friend who was local, and he kind of is a great kind of bridge for me to meet Japanese people, and I definitely found a community there, which was awesome. And as my kind of language abilities got better, that opened up more and more. And then there is a kind of small expat community in Tokyo. It's not like a Hong Kong or a London.
Hmm.
But there's sort of an interesting expat sort of scene in Tokyo, and had friends from all over the world.
Why
So,
do you call it interesting? Just because
well,
there's people there, or just interesting?
well, I think if you look at a city like Hong Kong or London, for example, people can kind of end up there just because they got transferred there and
Right.
whatever. I think people who end up in Tokyo are there for a reason. Either they're someone of Japanese heritage, kind of like discovering their roots. Either they were super into manga, comic books, or whatever. But there's kind of something, a deeper interest, I think, usually tied to people living in Tokyo,
Interesting.
which kind of brings the community together. Yeah.
Very cool. So, okay, so going back, I don't want to jump right away into your time there. So, just going back to the internship real quick. So, you got the full time offer. You're on the top of the world. Can you talk a little bit about that internship before we kind of move on, and a little bit about specifically why you thought you got the offer? Was it because they were hiring everybody because they were desperate for bodies, or do you feel like honestly you did something better than some of the other interns? Because I know there's a lot of people
Mm.
heading into their internships, even though a lot of it's work from home or a little bit
Yeah.
weird this year. But um,
Yeah, it was quite a few years ago, but yeah, I do remember having some experiences where I felt like I definitely was sort of excelling and kind of showing my worth and having my moments, and then others where I was totally I felt like totally at a disadvantage compared to other interns in terms of some of their technical knowledge. And
mhm.
it was sort of a roller coaster, I remember, of doubt
did they
and some
did
high
they give
points as
you
well.
did they give you positive feedback like halfway through? What was it like? Like, did you feel like you knew you had it in the bag at some point?
Yeah, I think once I kind of really started spending more time with one team, the tech team in particular,
Hmm.
there was kind of a lot of long nights where I was like, building, I think, important good relationships with people on that team, which I think in the long run is like what really matters. You
Right.
need, I guess, someone who's gonna speak up for you. And it's I guess it was 10 weeks or something like that, which is a good amount of time. But when you're kind of jumping around between different teams and all over the place, it's easy to kind of go the whole summer, I think, have people kind of not have much to say about the time together. So I think spending a lot of time with one team was one thing. And Jefferies might have been unique in that regard, that it was like explicitly a generalist
Was it
program.
hard? Was it hard to land that internship in the first place?
Yeah, I remember,
Like you sent them 500 emails out and get like how did you actually even land it?
so there was a um, alumnus from my university who was currently working there.
Okay.
And he came to campus to recruit. He was in my fraternity.
Mhm.
So that was kind of an easy connection. But I actually interviewed while in Japan because I was studying abroad there. So that kind of put me at a disadvantage. I couldn't, show up to all the super days and do the whole thing. So I kind of focused my efforts on one or two places, because that's kind of all I could do while I was remote. And I was fortunate enough that Jefferies were open to doing the super day virtually. So I remember I woke up at like 3 in the morning, and ran through these super days like in a like totally like hallucinogenic state.
Was it like a Skype conference call like or Zoom like the back in the day? This like
Yeah, it was a Skype.
yeah.
And they just came in back to back and did their thing.
You
I
were just
think,
on a computer like this. Like you're just
yeah,
sitting there.
just on the
Awesome.
computer. And in a way, I think, it might have even just set me apart because I was, the one dude in Tokyo at 3 in the morning joining via Skype.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think I don't think the repertoire has changed much. The DCF and the, little,
Valuation, yeah. All that stuff.
yeah.
And you so
And
you, you knew that stuff. You were ready.
Yeah, so I owe a lot to kind of the sort of champion I had there, this alumni who would call me up, in Tokyo and ask me to run through a DCF and all this stuff, and I would kind of go and I'd fumble my words, and he would just hang up the phone, and my heart would like sink, and I'd be like, oh my god, like he thinks I'm an idiot, I'm wasting his time, and then he'd call me back up and be like, I'm calling you again tomorrow. don't fuck
Study
it
it.
up. I'm not should say that here, but yeah. Uh, so I had someone pushing me, and yeah,
That's
I got
awesome. That's awesome. Good
yeah.
mentor. Pushing you. That's what I try to do with my mentees. I have three mentees now. And I'm always trying to get, I bust them a little bit. I'm like, we can tighten up that answer.
Yeah, it's
It's
important.
hard. It's hard because they're doing this actually on like a similar Zoom conference. It's like, it's actually broadcast. So it's kind of stressful for them too. So it's like,
Yeah, yeah, and you're nervous. So
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, so, okay. So it worked out. You ended up getting the offer. You ended up doing obviously really well. You're going through this, you're flying high senior year. And then like that moment, that decision where you're like, wait a second, I'm not going to take this. What was that like? And how did you even break it to them?
I remember I was with my dad, and I was kind of freaking out about the wrong things. I was sort of like, they already sent me a signing bonus, and I already signed a contract. Like, what happens if I blow this thing up, and like, what are the implications? And people who were more experienced, than I was at the time. In this case, my father was just like, look, Jefferies will will live. They will continue to function as a very successful investment bank, and I don't think they're going to sweat it too much. You need to just make the decision that's right for you. And so yeah, I remember it was a lot of thinking, a lot of kind of crowdsourcing of ideas, and I just consistently kept hearing from people. I'd say, I have an offer to work at this amazing investment bank, blah blah blah, great people, or kind of moving to Tokyo, joining a newly forming venture team, uh, and sort of who knows. But I think people could just tell that I was really excited about the latter, just the way I spoke about it. And luckily, I had kind of the right mentors and the right people to tell me that it was
Okay.
kind of
It's
hands
okay to
down.
take that more risky path.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me
Exactly.
about like that. What gave you that? I mean, you were obviously excited. You were really into tech. You really, it was a more natural fit for you, but it wasn't like you were going to some sort of established VC fund where you had
Mm.
some of that safety of that, process and whatnot. So what gave you that confidence? It's just like, I don't care. Like I believe in the person who's going to launch this.
It was exactly that. So in this case, it was the individual
Mhm.
who kind of took a massive leap of faith by offering me the job and hiring me. He's still a very close mentor today.
Why do
Um,
you think he had that confidence to hire an undergrad? Because
so
I
as
know
a
I know there are a lot of kids listening and be like, I want to go straight to VC.
Yeah. To be honest, I have no idea. But I'm really kind of happy that he did. I think
But
we
how did you develop that relationship? I guess just was it
so yeah.
cold? Was it through mutual friends? How did it?
So the kind of full backstory. When I was studying Japanese in college, I knew that I was wanting to study at a Japanese university for a semester.
Mhm.
And their semesters are a bit different, so it was kind of going to eat up a little bit of my summer. Plus, like they basically bring me right up to spring semester.
Okay.
So I figured I might as well kind of move there in the summer, find something interesting to do before the semester. Um, and so I kind of started reaching out to contacts, and ended up getting in touch with someone who worked at Disney in Japan. And I was, super excited. I wanted to, basically intern there in their kind of business development group. And I kind of built a relationship there, kind of got along in their process somewhat. It was going to kind of be an informal thing. And then at the last minute, they just couldn't sponsor a visa for whatever reason. It was too complicated.
Oh,
So they
wow.
kind of pulled it out from under me at the last minute. I was really, really bummed about that. But the contact I had there, who was also an expat, who I think kind of sympathized with kind of a young foreign dude looking to work in Japan, which is not an easy thing to do. He kind of opened his contact book to me, and the first contact he put was the guy who would end up being my future boss.
Mhm.
And I just kind of reached out with a cold email, I think it was a mix of good timing and we just hopped on a Skype call. I remember I took it from the library of at Johns Hopkins. Totally kind of unprepared. It was very kind of informal. Um, and it probably lasted like 15 minutes. And he was just like, yeah, okay, come over. We barely have an office. It was like two or three people. And he said, we'll find work for you to do. So I
Did
think
that include pay? Or did you feel like this is going to be unpaid, or did he say anything about
it,
that, or like were you nervous about like what is he going to pay
it,
me?
it included pay, I think only because it was legally required. I was paid hourly,
Yep.
not very much, but I was paid.
Hmm.
And it was an amazing experience that was supposed to last a summer. Ended up actually, I was sort of like moonlighting my whole semester study abroad. I was there in that office for like 7 months,
Wow.
helping out with stuff and building a relationship there. So,
Okay,
so
that's
I
why.
think,
That's why.
yeah. So I guess I left that kind of piece out, but yeah, it was a huge part of it was the relationship. I've learned this, as I've continued in my career, but it was especially, I think, important early on, as having a mentor who's really invested in you is like the most valuable thing you can have at probably any point in your career, but especially early on. And I really felt that connection with this guy, and felt like the right thing to do.
Awesome. So that's kind of giving you the confidence to say no to Jefferies to go take this, new startup fund. You get there, you're waiting tables because you're there a little early. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, what's going on here? What am I going to do? He's like, okay, you're hired. You
Yeah.
start. What's that first kind of week like? Or first,
Oh man. So basically, the firm, it was a new sort of branch of a very well established global VC firm. It used to be called something else. Now it's basically all branded as Eight Roads, and have been investing in China for decades, India for decades, Europe and the US for decades. Japan was sort of a new geography.
Mhm.
So there were probably three or four, 3, 4, or 5 sort of FTEs when I joined the team, and all very new joiners. And all external and internal communication was done in Japanese, which was kind of a shock. And all my colleagues were experienced investment professionals, or people coming from tech companies or consulting firms,
Real
real kind of
professionals.
top pedigree professionals. And I was a new grad, so the skill
How
gap
was their
and the
Japanese?
learning curve. Sorry.
Were they native from Japan, or were they was it
Yeah, all native from
oh
Japan.
man.
Everyone
Brutal.
everyone in the office were native speakers, except for me. But that was okay. There's nothing you can do about that. That's kind of learn as you go, and Japanese is a particularly difficult language, so you just gotta keep absorbing it, and that's kind of a long game. So no one expected me to be fluent overnight, but in terms of just kind of professional skills and then actual investment skills, that's something I had to develop totally from scratch. And it's like, in one sense, you mentioned some of your listeners might be saying, oh, how do I jump straight into VC? In some sense it's amazing and it's awesome when it does work out, but it's definitely in a firm like the one I joined, it wasn't an easy thing to do. It was pretty painful.
They
uh,
basically had to swim on your own. They threw you
yeah,
deep in,
yeah.
yeah.
So my manager definitely,
No training, no nothing.
yeah, I probably could have benefited from some of the investment banking training and all that stuff. But yeah, it was a totally sink or swim kind of experience. Eventually just really required me to say, like, what, like, no one is going to save you here. You've got to sit here on the weekend, learn how to build a financial model,
Was that
just
the hardest part,
couldn't cover.
just the technical like Excel skills and the hard skills of being an investor and be able just to look at something and evaluate it from the VC perspective, or was it more just a language barrier? Or both? It was just all coming at you from all different.
Yeah, I think the language barrier just like added a sort of a little, hot sauce to everything. It was kind of an omnipresent sort of challenge, but sort of the more like fundamental skills I think were all pretty difficult to just kind of pick up on the go and require a lot of just hard work to do. I mean, at least for me.
Did you get the
But
perspective that you were welcome there, being the only kind of expat, being kind of the most junior person that kind of was clueless when you first started? Just seeing it, like,
sometimes yes,
like, were
sometimes
people frustrated with you? Like, why is this guy even here?
absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, I think there was, definitely some of that along the way. That being said, I think, we were a small enough team that, people wanted to see me succeed. I think my success was ultimately in everyone's interest. And I had, not only my, the managing partner who was, the kind of believing in me from the beginning, but everyone at the firm, I think really, kind of went out of their way to mentor me, in ways I'm like still incredibly grateful for and are still paying dividends, for sure. But it definitely took time. There was definitely awkwardness of, just where my skills were and where, some other people's were. But,
Were
you know,
people actually like sitting you down and like being like, "Here's how you build it through"? Did somebody actually sit down with you and walk through that with you, or were they like, "Here, read this," and they just threw stuff at you?
a little bit of both.
I'm just trying to
Yeah,
get a sense of like what your how stressed out you were and how freaked out you were.
I was at times very, very stressed, very freaked out. But I was definitely supported.
And so, most of your day to day, was it like, here are these, potential companies? Did they want you to do any business development? Did they want you to do any sort of, like, what was the pipeline look? What did it look like? And like, was that
Yeah.
your main responsibility as the junior?
So maybe interesting to just add a little context
Yeah.
on that. So we were sort of, I guess you could say, like a Series A B investor
Hmm.
in Japan. But this was, at a time when the whole Japan venture market was very, very nascent. It still is, fairly nascent compared to some other markets. It's matured vastly since, those early years.
Hmm.
We're talking 2015, 16.
Yep.
Um, um, but we were sort of, in exploratory mode in a lot of ways, and the diversity of our team kind of reflected that. I mean, we were investing in kind of opportunities where we saw them. It wasn't like you had sort of this vast ocean of, Series B companies to, find exactly what metrics you like and all these things.
Right.
We needed to be a bit more thesis led than that. And so we kind of had a really interesting mix of people on the team from different backgrounds and, sort of invested in things we found interesting. We did everything from, uh, an electric wheelchair company to a gaming company to an aerospace company, SaaS companies, healthcare services companies. We really kind of did everything, which was super cool and great experience to learn a lot about a lot of different businesses. I think some VCs are very specialized by stage or by sector. We really kind of were kind of looking at a bit of everything, which kind of helps you kind of see the full landscape and get a lot of exposure. So, yeah, in that context,
Were you guys given a specific? Sorry to interrupt, but were you given a specific amount to invest out of a certain?
yeah. So at that point, we had a fund. I think it was like a $250 million
Okay.
fund,
Yep.
which at the time was one of the biggest
Which is
funds
a lot, yeah, back then, and
in Japan.
and you have to invest it in Japan, I see, right? That's the
And
goal.
we were really successful with that fund, and ended up raising a second, in my time there, larger fund. But my responsibilities, just the way how we were set up, and as a junior, I was sort of spending most of my time on the execution side of things. So we would, have sort of, most of the sourcing done on the senior. side of the team, bringing in interesting opportunities, and very flat organization. So I could say I didn't like something. I just had to be articulate as to why.
Hmm.
And then we're all just sort of working together to evaluate the businesses, do financial modeling around them to understand different aspects, understanding the market,
How long
competitor.
did it take you to get you to get comfortable saying you don't like something to the partner? and was it mostly thesis driven in terms of when you said you didn't like something, or was it more like after you ran the numbers, you would speak up?
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny. I think it kind of ties back to like my experience. As you said, like I was coming in, without many skill. It was hard for me to speak up in the sense that I, didn't have much experience behind me.
But you had worked there for 7 months almost prior, right?
Yes, that's right. As an intern. So I mean, I guess I had to kind of rely on, what are the areas I do know? What are sort of the things that do set me apart, and where, my voice, has, a bit more reason behind it.
Hmm.
And, I found, I was sort of the only millennial, kind of true millennial age person on the team from the States, who, a lot of tech trends are kind of coming to the US first, and then, they might show up in Japan later. So I kind of had a different perspective, which is valued. So I would say I think this is interesting because I saw a really successful company doing something like this in the U.S. or the opposite. I saw companies trying to do this in the U.S. and here's why the model failed.
Mm.
Um, those are kind of the ways at first I would kind of choose to kind of speak up, and then kind of later as I kind of built the skill set around financial analysis and so on.
You can
You know,
get a little more nuanced. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
very cool. So you're there for a little over 2 years in Tokyo. Tell me why or what prompted the move to, it was London, right? You moved to London.
Hmm.
Tell me what prompted that move, and what was the kind of internal process for making that move?
Yeah, so we were sort of expanding as a firm, uh, globally, and one of the new geographies we had in our crosshairs was Israel.
Hmm.
We had made a couple of early investments, um, not in terms of their stage, but our first investments in Israel, about a year or two prior, and they'd both gone sort of exceptionally well. Opened a lot of doors for us, and we decided to kind of formalize our efforts there, and kind of see what we could build out. Israel is a notoriously difficult venture market. It's extremely local. Um, it's small. It's highly networked. It's not easy to break into, and some of the best firms in the world, have sort of come and gone, set up shop and left because they haven't been able to break in there. So we were kind of
You're
kind of
basically getting in on the right deals. That's what it's about, right? And knowing.
yeah, exactly. And I kind of saw the opportunity. I was interested in just getting more experience. I had such a rewarding experience, immersing myself in a new business culture and a new culture, in Japan, and thought it'd be interesting to just kind of do it again, and just keep learning, and keep gaining exposure. So I sort of raised my hand as sort of being super interested in that, and was lucky to be able to make that move. I think I was the first person in the firm to ever kind of jump geographies like that. And I think it just has to do with the local nature of BC. It's just very much about the ecosystem you're in, and the network. But being kind of junior, it kind of, I think, lets you do that. And then
You
kind of,
hadn't completely like grounded yourself. Your roots weren't there necessarily. You still had enough time to.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think once you want to like really kind of build your career as a VC, kind of rise up the ranks, you want to sort of pick a spot somewhat, or pick kind of where you're really gonna build out those roots. But I felt like I was still kind of in a phase where I could jump around. So I ended up moving to our London office. which was sort of Europe and Israel focused fund. We were a bit bigger in fund. We were a $375 million fund there, and the strategy was a bit more focused on growth. So kind of Series B plus. And we were investing across Europe and Israel. And again, the team was incredibly diverse. I think we spoke like 12 languages. Amongst us, we had people covering the Nordics and Germany and France and Spain and all the localities in Europe and all in local languages. I'm not a Hebrew speaker, but people in Israel speak English. So we ended up hiring someone on the ground in Israel. We just felt that was essential to have a presence there. And then I joined. We have a couple other Israeli colleagues on the team, and we really kind of built out a formal effort in Israel. We invested in a number of really exciting companies. One of them being the company I ended up joining. And again, it was just an amazing experience. I gained totally different skill sets there. Just even if you move just kind of slightly in terms of stage of investing, it can kind of involve totally different skill sets.
Can you tell me about how that shifted going from, a little earlier stage Series A to B?
Yeah, for sure. So in Europe, we were sort of a much more kind of typical, like kind of, growth investor setup, early growth investor, meaning that, most of the junior team is kind of heavily involved in sourcing. That's kind of our primary responsibility, is to reach out to kind of as many companies as possible, track as many companies as possible, and basically, have them, sort of warmed up and ready when they're kind of in your sweet spot, and kind of be there to have conversations at the right time about investment. So that's kind of a huge part of the responsibility, and that can be pretty grueling. In terms of, sort of, they call it smiling and dialing. You're really doing a lot of that. But it can also be a lot of fun because, it means going to conferences and, in the context of this fund, traveling all over Europe, and meeting entrepreneurs, which actually is not so bad. And did a lot of that. And then, we were much kind of more rigorous around, finding financial profiles that kind of really fit with our sort of investment strategy. So we were looking for, kind of unit economics that we liked, certain growth profile that we liked. And then obviously, management teams that we were confident in, and kind of, overall stories that were compelling. But kind of the rigor of analysis was I think much higher as you move kind of up the investment curve. And there was that component.
Do you feel like, I know there's some of that here in Silicon Valley. There's a little bit of if there's one really strong anchor investor, everyone just is trying to get into the same deal because it's assumed there's almost like there's a little bit of the groupthink going on. Did you feel like that was the case there, where there's like a hot company and everyone's trying to get in? Or do you feel like there's enough inefficiencies where the diligence you're putting in that like rigor on the financial side actually was creating any value for you guys?
Yeah. No, I mean, it was definitely like that. Everyone feels the FOMO.
Yeah.
And, everyone kind of knows the hot deals. And, that being said, I think, compared
the relationships are still really important, right? Having built those up prior.
Yeah, of course. Relationships important. And I think, Europe was an interesting market in that, we really were seeing, unicorns, I mean, not necessarily even unicorns, but, extremely successful investments being made all over Europe. They could kind of come from anywhere. I mean, we saw billion-dollar companies, coming out of, Poland, and, multiple coming out of, places like France and Germany. But, kind of it was really an interesting landscape. And a company doesn't have to be, a billion-dollar company to be a really successful investment. So there definitely were, I think, interesting arbitrage kind of opportunities, and we were constantly on the hunt for those across Europe. I think it made it a really interesting place to be an investor.
Mhm.
It's still a very saturated, very competitive market, but I think maybe in a different way than the U.S.
In what sense? Why do you say that?
Well, I think we still have sort of the concept of brand name funds coming in, and in some cases still paying really high valuations, but sort of coming in and taking all the really hot deals.
Mhm.
um, that being said, I think because there's an element of um, local presence and European track record, and kind of some other components where, as a firm, with a discrete strategy, with a focus, you can still kind of build an exciting investment strategy for yourself without sort of just falling into, okay, um, FOMO, or
For sure.
chasing the same deals, or yeah, I think you get what I mean.
So you're in VC for almost 4 years, or over 4 years.
Exactly 4 years.
4
Yeah.
years. So why leave? What kind of why not do the full lifer, VC for life?
Yeah.
It can be really rewarding, both financially, intellectually. Or did you feel like you just wanted a new challenge? What was the thought process? I think it's helpful for the listeners to hear,
Yeah.
you know, from the other side of like what were you looking for?
Yeah. That's I think the essential question. I really enjoyed being an investor. I'm like still getting used to saying that in the past tense. And it is, as you said, like it's probably one of the most intellectually stimulating kind of finance jobs I think that you can have. I mean, we're kind of trying to become experts in everything. Like, we know a little bit about everything and a lot about nothing.
Hmm.
um, and you're constantly on the phone with entrepreneurs who are trying to fundamentally just disrupt industries. So you're sort of drinking from a tap, which is just like the vanguard of industry globally,
Hmm.
and speaking to really smart people. So that aspect of it I absolutely loved, and still cherish that experience. Like I said, it is super competitive. It's grind. The smartest people are not always the best investors. Um, and in kind of the arc of your career, I think I was also a bit unusual in that I started from VC.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's really something I very well may go back to at some point in my career. But I sort of looked at a lot of my colleagues, and saw people who came, from entrepreneurial experiences or tech backgrounds, or kind of other experiences. I mean, that's the kind of interesting thing about VC, is sort of the problem set that we're dealing with is kind of so fundamental, that sort of anyone with a really kind of business background, no matter where that comes from, kind of has the toolkit to do what a VC does.
Hmm.
There's sort of a separate kind of VC toolkit that you sort of build over time, but it's really kind of a mix of different backgrounds. And so I kind of looked at some of my peers that had sort of more diverse experience. I think it makes you a better investor, more rounded kind of thinker,
Hmm.
and just figured now is a good time. Also had a lot to do with this particular company, which I can tell you about as well. But
So you weren't thinking I want to go to investment banking.
yeah, that at this
You
point,
weren't thinking, or you weren't thinking private equity. Potentially, I want to move to more mature companies, less, not the growth, because it's oftentimes people say that's less exciting. It's more financial engineering.
well, it's interesting. I think I was actually kind of split. I think like part of me was pulling me much closer to sort of operating company side, where I ended up, and kind of
Mhm.
dealing with these kind of challenges in a more hands-on way. Um, but actually, having spent 4 years as an investor, you sort of learn kind of the financial kind of language, and you start to kind of understand really like what makes a really interesting financial you know enterprise. And it's it's sort of a science, it's sort of an art. and VCs love to blog about it and talk about their new method of understanding unit economics and this and that. But it really is just a really fascinating multi-dimensional kind of problem to work in VC, and I easily could see myself kind of going back to that world.
For sure. So tell me why make the jump, or why make the jump when you did, and the move back to the US?
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny you mentioned those things happening together. That was intentional.
It was, or it was not?
It was.
Yeah.
So I did want to move back to the U.S. For me, it was just about kind of putting down roots here as it's home. I've got a girlfriend who's in medical school here now.
Mm-hmm.
Made sense for a lot of reasons. And in terms of this company, it is an Israeli company that has a presence in New York, an office in New York. And I was just, totally pumped about the company, and it sort of just the stars aligned. But yeah, I met the founders like any other company. Did the first call, got the presentation, heard a bit about the story and what they do. Israelis are, probably the most excitable entrepreneurs you can speak to, and the most assertive about how they're going to build $1 billion companies.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was an incredibly energetic pitch. I was sort of totally hooked, and I probably saw 500 plus pitches in 4 years, maybe probably more than that.
Mm-hmm.
There really are you really kind of do know a good pitch when you see one, and a good story when you hear one.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it, and we sort of started digging in more. I started flying back and forth to Israel, spending more time with the team, running the process. I ended up following the team, to a conference in Las Vegas, spending time with them there, and just getting to know them a bit better. And I just really believed in the company. I thought the opportunity in front of them was enormous. I really liked the people. And I was in New York for business, and I hit up the CEO to get drinks to celebrate after we closed the round.
Mm-hmm.
And we started having a more kind of candid conversation. And we sort of floated the idea of me joining. Anyway, fast forward 3-4 months, and I was joining full time right at the beginning of this coronavirus situation.
Tell me a little bit about that. How's that been starting? Have you been able to kind of really get going, or?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can share super briefly a bit about what the company does, because
That'd
it's
be great.
related. The company's called Gloat, and basically we're building internal talent marketplaces in some of the largest employers in the world. So what that basically means is, it's a two-sided marketplace. On one side, you have employees, their skills and their capacity, their career aspirations. And on the other side of the marketplace, you have HR and managers who have work to be done. And that work, we find, in sort of the traditional organization, you have roles and hierarchies and job architectures, and that's kind of how the rules are written, at least on paper. But we know in reality, that's not how the modern enterprise functions. People are working in small projects. People are acquiring skills as they go. People are finding new mentors, so on and so forth. So we sort of are building the new operating system for how a large enterprise utilizes its talent.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, managers and HR are posting project-based work. It could be full-time roles, job shadowing opportunities, volunteer opportunities, mentorship opportunities to a marketplace. And employees are basically able to get matched to those opportunities and work in a more agile way. We have a AI that's basically matching the two together, and we're powering this type of talent marketplace globally at some of the largest employers in the world. Unilever is a customer of ours. Schneider Electric is another customer of ours. And what's so cool to me about the company is, what we've built is a piece of software, like any tech company. But when we sort of put our piece of software into an enormous company, Unilever's over 100,000 employees, we sort of completely transform the way that the organization works. And we're hoping to do a lot more of that. So it's kind of really, really big vision, and really, really big impact. Amazing team. So that's what I'm involved with now.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
At what level do you feel like a company has to be before they're really able to drive value? Or if you guys are, is it based on like a per employee count? Is that how you guys are pricing it, kind of thing, where it's, under 1,000 employees, it's one bucket, or under 500, one bucket kind of thing? Is that
Yeah. So we're really focused on like
large enterprise?
Fortune 500.
Yeah.
So that's where the problems we're solving become most relevant. And the reason I wanted to mention this in light of coronavirus is, a huge kind of challenge facing companies now is, obviously the uncertainty. A lot of them are implementing hiring freezes. And a lot of businesses are facing huge disruption where you have, one part of the business, in these large companies, which could, employ thousands of people, it could be functions supporting, retail operations, for example. That goes to zero. And then, another part of your business, goes to 100, and you need a way to sort of dynamically reallocate your talent, to where it's needed in the business. So companies are grappling with really hard decisions around: do I lay off workers? Do I furlough workers? Do I find a way to reallocate
Right.
workers? The issue with the reallocation at scale is that they have no way of understanding, what underlying skills employees have, kind of beneath their job title. So we capture all that data, and we're able to sort of, do this kind of reallocation dynamically and at scale. So we're doing that and helping a lot of companies through these challenges now, and helps people just gain new experience on the job, discover new directions for their careers, kind of all in real time. So that's yeah, it's exciting times for us now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So anything, I appreciate you sharing your story with everybody. Anything you'd kind of looking back, anything you'd change, or any advice you want to leave the listeners with before we call it?
It's a great question. I don't think there's anything I would change. I think maybe I'm lucky to be able to say that. I think obviously hindsight is 2020, but I think just constantly staying open to opportunities is super important. Even this most recent jump for me from VC to operating company, felt like an enormous leap in the moment. And looking back feels like such an obvious choice, and like an amazing choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just kind of always keeping open to opportunities, always keeping open-minded is super important. I think it's particularly pertinent for the financial industry, where there's just, so much sort of, you get on the treadmill and you don't get off, and, the pay is, literally designed to kind of keep you on the treadmill. And it's interesting because I think people who kind of have careers in finance and do find a way to kind of step away, end up doing really interesting things. And sometimes they end up coming back, back to a financial profession, kind of with a totally new perspective. And I think it's just, worth keeping really open-minded and trying not to follow the pack.
Yeah, we get a lot of that in WSO. Banking, private equity is not the only way.
Yeah.
It's a great way if you can do it. It's a great way. It's a great way to get some experience, but it's not the only way. And hopefully, everyone listening to this, hopefully these guests kind of help open your eyes to different paths you can take, including jumping to Tokyo straight out of undergrad, barely, and surviving.
Works out.
But Brian, thanks so much for taking the time to share your story with everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Patrick.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. And until next time.